sure is bad. There ain't no man, no woman, no beast alive that can beat me, 'cause I'm born to fight.
Welcome to Big Tent USA. Big Tent is a national grassroots advocacy organization that promotes a moderate political platform focusing on the rights of all Americans, civic engagement, good governance at the local, state, and federal level. Founded by a group of women in 2019, Big Tent breaks through the political noise and provides substantive information, concrete action items, and innovative activism opportunities for members to make a positive difference in their communities and beyond. We are an inclusive coalition of women who value decency and effective governance, truthful and ethical leadership, equality, justice, and opportunity for all. So we hope that you will check out our website, bigtentusa.org, and follow us on social at Big Tent USA. And we hope you'll join us for our final event of 2021, which will be on the evening of December 8th with Charlie Whelan, who is the founder and co-chair of Unite America. And we're kicking off 2022 with the barn burner. Sheldon Whitehouse is joining us on January 12th to talk about the dark money influence on the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court. So you don't want to miss that one. If you're still steaming mad about SB 8, and I really hope you are, it's not too late to write postcards to corporations in Texas that continue to support those legislators who, including Greg Abbott, who wrote and passed SB 8. And the link is in the chat. You can go on the Women's March Action website and download some postcards and send those off, because we really do need to make corporate accountability a prime issue going into 2022. So we are very, very thrilled to welcome Amanda Litman, the co-founder and executive director of Run for Something, which recruits and supports young, diverse progressives running for local office. Since 2017, they've identified more than 85,000 young people across the country who want to run, and they've elected more than 630, mostly women and people of color. Amanda is the author of the book, Run for Something, a real talk guide to fixing the system yourself. It's kind of like a Big Tent guide too. That's what we like to do. And host of Run for Something, the podcast on Dear Media. I am an Amanda Litman fan group. She is a fantastic podcast host. So if you haven't listened to her, you must do it. She's dynamite. Politico named Run for Something and Amanda one of the 50 ideas driving politics in 2018. Bloomberg called her one of the people to watch in 2019. She was named one of Fortune's 40 under 40. Sorry, Amanda, you're not 50 under 50. In 2020, Amanda has written for outlets like Cosmopolitan, BuzzFeed, The Nation, Teen Vogue, CNN, MTV, Vanity Fair, O Magazine, Crooked Media, and more. So we are so thrilled to have you with us, Amanda. Please put your questions in the chat for our conversation with Amanda after she gives us a download on Run for Something. So Amanda, take it away.
Katie and Vanessa, thank you so much for inviting me to join, and to everyone for joining for a lovely hour on a Tuesday afternoon. I apologize in advance if my dog gets a little barky. Sadie really doesn't like it when I do anything besides pay attention to her, so it makes my days a little chaotic. As Katie said, my name is Amanda Litman. I'm one of the co-founders and co-executive directors of Run for Something. What I'd love to do today is tell you a little bit about how Run for Something got started, what we do for our candidates, how we support them, a couple of our success stories, and then a little bit about what we're doing in 2022, and then open it up for any questions you might have. I was born and raised in Northern Virginia. I went to Northwestern for college specifically because I wanted to work for Barack Obama. I realized that his campaign was based in Chicago, and that's where I wanted to be, which is not a great reason to pick a college, but here we are. I got my degree in American Studies with a focus specifically on women running for office. So this has always been a passion of mine. I wrote my thesis in college about how, sort of as an aside, about women running for office against other women and how it changes gender performance in TV ads. It was super interesting and now super relevant. My senior year, I got an internship on the Obama campaign in the Chicago headquarters doing online fundraising. I was hired before I graduated, worked all the way through election day. We won. Winning is great. Stayed on to work for the president's nonprofit Organizing for Action for about a year, moved to Florida and worked on the governor's race in 2014 as the digital director for that campaign. Then moved to New York, where I now live, to work for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. I helped launch it on before day one, worked all the way through full 2 years, and on election night was at the Javits Center in the staff section behind the scenes, devastated. About a week after election day, I got a Facebook message from somebody I went to college with. Hey, Amanda, I'm a public school teacher here in Chicago. I've seen on Facebook that you've been working in politics for a while. I want to run for office because if Trump can be president, it seems like anybody can do this. What do I do? And at the time, November 2016, I didn't have an answer for him. There was nowhere you could go that would be guaranteed to take your call. If you were a young person who didn't have a ton of money and really wasn't like part of the political process, but knew you wanted to do more than vote and more than volunteer. If you actually wanted to lead, there was no on-ramp for you. And that to me felt like a symptom of really big problems. We weren't focusing on young people, not just as voters, but as leaders. We weren't building a bench of diverse talent for the future. And we weren't focusing on local politics. There was really no committee for school board candidates or city council candidates. There wasn't a place you could go. So I reached out to a whole bunch of people with an idea. What if we started an organization, like a little bit like Emily's List, a little bit like some of these other groups, but really prioritizing young people, local elections. We can help them, we can find them, we can get them all the way through. One of those folks connected me to Ross Morales-Ricchetto, who became my co-founder and co-ED. Ross has been working in campaigns for about 15 years. He's done everything from labor and presidential campaigns to school board races, which he used to manage for fun in college. We wrote a plan, we built a website, and then we launched Run for Something on Inauguration Day. And we really thought it was going to be small. We're like, we'll get 100 people who want to run in the first year. Ross was managing a congressional race. I was interviewing for like a marketing job at J. Crew. We thought this would be our hobby that we would do in our free time. In the first week, 1,000 people signed up. Since then, nearly 90,000 young people have raised their hands. So what was going to be my weekend hobby is now a full-time multi-million-dollar organization that is working with thousands of young people running for office each year. We have built a program that does two big things. We recruit people and then we support them. Recruitment looks in many ways a lot like this. Often talking to young people, to college groups, to high school groups, to corporate networking groups, to any organization or membership that will have us. We do ads, we do press, we run National Run for Office Day, which is our big candidate recruitment holiday. We work with celebrities, we work with other elected officials, we work with our partner organizations, all in service of, for us, reaching young people, which is folks 40 years old and younger, running for things like city council, state legislature, school board, library board, coroner, water board, mosquito abatement district, everything state, house, state senate, and below. And we work with people who are identifying as Democrats or progressives, but we have a pretty expansive definition there. I'm happy to get more into that if you're interested. We work with people who are running for the first or second time. So it's not incumbents moving up the ladder. It's not mayors seeking state senate seats. It's people for whom this is their first entry point into life as an elected official or as a public servant. And then we work with people who are willing to do the work. Our main criteria for candidates beyond any particular resume line or wealth or any of that is this someone who's going to work hard and who can answer the questions, why do you want to run? Why should voters want you to win? And why this office? Because if you can answer those questions, the rest of your campaign gets so much easier. When people think they're interested in running for office, or they think they might be one day possibly thinking about running for office, they sign up on our website. They enter their information. They can look up the offices available on the ballot for them in the following year. They then join a conference call. We do these every week. We talk through the basic questions that every first-time candidate has. How do I run for office? How do I know what position to run for? How do I get the vote out? How do I raise money? Then they have a one-on-one with one of our volunteers. And we have hundreds of volunteers who do this, which any of you are welcome to do. There's no special skills needed. We'll train you up with everything you need to know. And you talk to future candidates. you get a little more information about them. We provide our volunteers with materials to provide to the candidates. It helps us learn who our demographics are, who our community is, and helps us screen out the folks who don't meet those criteria. So, trolls, but also people who might be running for Congress or who think they want to run for president, that kind of thing, which we get a lot of, oddly. Once people have a one-on-one with one of our volunteers, they're admitted into the Run for Something pipeline. And that includes everything you could imagine. We work with partners from across the Democratic and progressive space, from the far left, the center, to everyone in between, all in service of giving our candidates the resources they need. So with some organizations, that means endorsements and money and volunteers. With others, it's fact sheets and issue trainings. It's how do you get a union endorsement in your community? And what do you do if you only have one staff and you need to do opposition research? We really, because of our focus on local politics and young people, we can really target our trainings intentionally for smaller races, often more digitally savvy candidates. And because most of the folks we work with are young women and young people of color, we can really speak to the concerns of these races. We have a network of about 500 mentors across the country who also work one-on-one with our candidates. So if you are a city council candidate in Kansas and you have a question about housing policy, you submit a mentor request and we'll connect you to someone who used to work on housing policy in the White House who can help you figure out the best way to answer it. Maybe you need content creators or website developers or a designer. Whatever it is, we have people who will help you for free. We also have big community building efforts. So Facebook groups, Slacks, group chats, one-on-one mentorship, all in service of making sure that the people who are running for office know they're not alone. They know that they're not scared, because it is really lonely and really hard and not particularly glamorous to run for office, especially when you're doing so in a place where there aren't a lot of other people who share your values. So we try to make sure that people know they're part of a larger movement. The final stage of the Run for Something pipeline is our endorsement process. You write a plan, you submit your campaign budget, your win numbers, all the opposition research that people will have on you. You answer a bunch of questions, including alignment with the Run for Something values. And from there, we do a rigorous review. Every person who applies for endorsement gets background checked. We want to know what we're going to find. We're going to know what your opponents are going to find. We do rigorous social media scrubs to see what you've said online. And we have folks in every state who give us some political context. So while we may not know the details of the Hawaiian political scene, we have a state operative there who gives us the context. We endorse about half the people who apply. So over the lifetime of the organization, it's meant more than 1,800 endorsements. Endorsed candidates then have a one-on-one with our regional director for their state. That one-on-one, we ask, what do you need? Maybe your campaign manager needs training. Maybe you haven't been able to hire a campaign manager yet at all. Maybe you need prep for a debate. Maybe you need the state party to answer your emails. Whatever it is you need, our regional directors are there as one part consultant, one part coach, one part therapist. And we will find a way to help you whatever it is that your circumstances need. Endorsed candidates connected to alumni. So people we've endorsed like them in previous cycles. So if you are a college student running in Connecticut in 2020, you might get connected to the college student who ran in Wisconsin in 2019. Because of the scope of our network, we now can basically connect one-to-one nearly everyone with someone who's run in a circumstance like them, which has allowed for some really beautiful relationships that have then persisted into governing, which I think is really cool. Endorsed candidates are who we recommend to press. They're who we recommend to other organizations. When President Obama's office says they want to endorse down ballot, who do we recommend? The endorsed folks is who we send over. Endorsed candidates are also who we track through to election day. When we think about the number of folks we've helped elect, we actually know the number of people on the ballot through our pipeline is about 3x bigger based on data matching. But the endorsed folks are the people that we rigorously watch. And then after election day, they're the people that we help win or lose. As Katie said up top, Run for Something's helped elect 630 people across 48 states. Those winners are about 55% women, about 52% Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and about 25% LGBTQ+. They are in about a third of all more than that now, maybe about half of all state legislative chambers have Run for Something alum in them. 30-something counties have multiple Run for Something alum on their county or city boards. About a third of the New York City Council next year will be Run for Something alum. Similarly, in Boston, about a third of the Boston City Council will be Run for Something alum. I believe we make up almost all of the Indianapolis County Council, and much, if not all, of the Columbia City Council and the Gwinnett County Commission in Georgia. All that's to say is that our candidates are slowly taking over in a really cool way. We have gotten to see what it means when you elect a young, diverse, courageous, brave leader into office. In Harris County, Texas, Lena Hidalgo, when she was 28 years old, decided to run for county executive in Harris County, which is where Houston is. It's called the county judge. She was going up against a Republican who'd been in office for about a decade. And nobody thought she could win. When she told the state party, I want to run for this office, they were like, cool, good luck. Run for Something helped her. We worked with her along with our partners over at the arena to make sure that Lena was able to staff up and raise money and navigate the tricky, complicated way in which one lives by their values in Texas while still connecting with Texan voters. And Lena was able to win in 2018. Then in 2020, she was able to 10x the election administration budget and do things like open 24-hour voting centers in Harris County, as well as entirely redo the county's budgeting process, which is something like a $3 billion budget or something like that. It's the third largest county in America. It's pretty substantial, in a way that really focused on the most needed, the most marginalized folks in the community. She's done things like end cash bail and provide incredible amounts of money for unhoused folks, people who are homeless. She, along with the county attorney in Harris County, which is Christian Menefee, another Run for Something alum, have been aggressive on suing the state about some of the voter suppression laws, as well as pushing back against some of the really anti-mask, anti-vaccine efforts from the state government. In Florida, Representative Ana Eskamani, who flipped a district outside Orlando and then proceeded to hold it in 2020, has helped more than 50,000 Floridians get access to unemployment benefits. In Colorado, Brianna Titone, who was the first trans person elected in the state of Colorado, helped something like 3,000 Coloradans access unemployment benefits. Her colleague, David Ortiz, who is an Afghan veteran, who serves in a wheelchair after being injured in combat when he served, who was the first openly bisexual member of the state legislature, has done things like ensure that all Colorado government websites now have to be accessible for people with disabilities, which previously they were not. What we have seen over and over again, from New York expanding access to early voting to Texas expanding access to so much within the counties, to seeing Waterloo, Iowa, a small city, provide bereavement leave for women who experience miscarriages or other fertility issues, is that when you elect leaders on a local level who really care, they can make life better for so many people. And then they move on to run for higher office. And we've already started to see that, which is one of the coolest parts of now having done this for 5 years. In Pennsylvania, Malcolm Kenyatta is running for the United States Senate. He's a gay Black man who's been serving in the state house from Philadelphia, who's been an avid advocate for working people. In Arizona, Jevin Hodge is running for Congress. He ran for Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and came up just a couple hundred votes short, now running for Congress. And we expect to see a number of our other candidates running for higher office and announcing over the next couple months. And I'm really, really pumped because some of these folks are amazing. And we've been able to connect them to committees like the DCCC, the Democratic Attorney General's Association, and others who can help them as well. As we look to 2022, we have a couple big priorities. First, we are continuing recruitment. 2021 was our best recruitment year yet, which shocked me. When we started this year, we did not really know what to expect in sort of a post-Trump era. But this calendar year, we've had more than 20,000 young people sign up to run. It is far and away exceeding our previous cycles. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And part of that is because we focus on local office. And as Congress especially seems to do less and less, local government is doing more and more. Part of that is because we've seen the far right and extremists focus on local office. We know that the Proud Boys have explicitly said we're focusing our attention to school boards and city councils. QAnon is recruiting for school board members. Moms for Liberty is training school board candidates. Leadership Institute, which is a decades-old conservative activist training center is running a podcast every week on here's how to run your school board campaign. Now, all of this is hammered home over the last year, how important it is to get leaders who care about democracy, who care about honesty, who care about facts into these positions. So our recruitment has amped up, and we're really glad to see that. We have also this year worked with, we had about 271 candidates on the ballot in a couple weeks ago now. Yeah, 2 weeks ago today. More than half of them this year have won, which is remarkable. And we expect to have about 700 endorsed candidates on the ballot in 2022, to give you a sense of the scale that we are working. So as we look to next year, we're continuing recruitment. We're especially focusing on 2 buckets of races. The first is local election administrators, county clerks, city clerks, county recorders, especially as it doesn't seem like Congress is going to pass democracy reform. We know that these local election authorities are the sort of last stand we have to protect access to the polls. They can make the best out of crappy voter suppression laws, or they can actually advance meaningful progress. So much of the problem that comes when people are trying to vote is polling places being closed or understaffed, as we heard over the last year or two. And that's something local election administrators have a lot of control over. So we're doing a bunch of recruitment around that in some key states, and looking ahead to even 2023 and 2024 to ensure that, especially in places we know Republicans are going to mess around with democracy, we have really strong democracy and constitution-minded candidates there. Second is school boards. This is a pet sort of issue for me. I think that there is so much potential and something that makes it really hard. Because school board elections, there is a school board election somewhere in the United States every week of the year, 52 weeks out of the year. It is really hard to do this work nationally at the scale that we do. And Run for Something has worked with hundreds of school board candidates. We've had more than half our school board candidates in 2021 were successful, and I expect that to continue. We are really digging in on how we can better engage in these races and provide more support, whether that's research on how to talk about CRT or anti-CRT or whatever it is, the issue of the moment when they're going to the doors, to how to build coalitions. It's really tricky, and I think it's something we have to prioritize, because I think a lot about what Ralph Reed, who was a leader of the far Christian right, said 20 or 30 years ago. I'd rather have 1,000 school board candidates than one president. It's really important with the way in which we educate our kids. So I don't need to tell you all of that, you know it, but I just want to say those are the 2 big things that we are focusing on. That is not to say we're not also paying attention to state legislative races and the focus they have on redistricting and voter suppression laws and all of that, as well as judicial elections, city council races, municipal ones. We're doing it all. But as we think about our prioritization next year, it's local election admins and school boards that are going to be our high priority. I would say we have done all of this over the last 4 years, spending less than $3 million a year, about average. We're looking to more than double that going into 2022. We also run through a couple different entities. We have a non-federal PAC that does most of our work. That's what works with candidates day to day. We have a 501c4, a social welfare group. And then we just launched earlier this week our 501c3 Run for Something Civics, which focuses on the recruitment side of things and then support after election day, as well as some research projects we hope to launch in the next 18 months. So all that's to say, a lot of different ways to support our work, a lot of different ways that we do it. All of it is in service of recruiting and supporting young, diverse leaders who really care about taking ownership of our democracy. I think I just rambled quite a bit, but I would love to answer any and all of your questions and dig in on anything you might have more specifics about.
Thank you, Amanda. Wow, there's a lot to dig in on. And, this is a nice small group. It's intimate. So please feel free to raise your hand or, put it in the chat. I do have a bunch of questions for Amanda. I'm sure you do too, but, anyone chime in on this, okay? So I just very quickly, can you give us a sort of what it looks like? You were talking about supporting obviously the recruitment, and then they go through a very serious vetting process, but you did say that you support these candidates whether they win or lose after election day. Can you sort of describe what that looks like and how you sort of make sure they are successful? Because it does sound like you have a great bench of candidates who then go on to run for maybe a bigger office?
Such a good question. So for folks who lose, I'll start with those. We run every year, this will be our second or third year doing so, a resiliency training afterwards. We work with a organization called Navient, I believe. No, that's the student loan book. There's an organization that does clinical resiliency training with people who've been through like a hardship. So part of that's just giving people space to talk with others who have experienced a loss of a campaign, who've like experienced it's a professional failing. So giving people space to process that. And then it's really getting into the tangibles of things like, how do you explain city council race on a resume? How do you put that? You learn a lot in that. How do you put it on a resume? If you want to run again, what do you do to prepare for it? If you don't want to run again, how else can you get involved? And we've had a bunch of our alum go on to start local civic organizations, nonprofits. My favorite is we had a guy in Blue Springs, Missouri, who ran in 2017 for city council on the platform of turning the entire city over to solar energy. He wanted to change electricity delivery. And one of the things he did as part of his campaign was start a Facebook group, as one does. He lost his first campaign, and after the election, he turned his Facebook group into a nonprofit that was focusing on climate issues in Blue Springs, Missouri. Just proceeded to then use that nonprofit 2 years later as a launch point for his own campaign again, and this time he won. So we have seen quite a bit of that kind of journey. For folks who win, we do a couple of things. One is we work with groups like the State Innovation Exchange and Local Progress and a number of others who do support for people who are governing, to make sure that they know that these people have been elected, that they're there, that they get special outreach, that these people are stars. We do a bunch of alumni gatherings throughout the year. So collecting our school board candidates and our school board members and putting them all on a Zoom, or our city council candidates or members and putting them all on a Zoom, things like that. We do a number of events with our alumni, panels that we do publicly as well as stuff we do privately. And then we are working now behind the scenes with organizations like the DLCC, the DCCC, and the DAGA to ensure that as they're thinking about their recruiting, they know about our bench and our pipeline, and that we're able to facilitate some specific relationships there.
That's so impressive. And I'm sure that those candidates, whether they've won or lost, really appreciate that. So can you talk to, Amanda, you seem to have really struck a major weakness in just the democratic, institutions, that we just ignored local elections for so long. So tell us what you're seeing from the Democratic Party, the machinery of it, in terms of paying attention to local elections. Obviously, it sounds like you are really communicating with like the DCCC, and so just give us a sense for what's going on in that way, because I know I feel reassured knowing you're doing what you're doing, and that in 2022 you're going to be focusing on elections and school boards. But give us a sense of how the Democratic Party is paying attention to you and what you're doing.
Well, just last weekend, I was able to join DNC Chair Jamie Harrison for his podcast, for his show, Welcome to the Party, which worth listening to. It was an interesting conversation. More broadly, we work with all sort of facets of the Democratic Party. In fact, most of our prioritization for the official entities is on the state and county level, because that's where most of the work happens from state and local races. There isn't a deal, there's a DLCC, a DSCC, a DCCC, DAGA, DGA, all the acronyms, but there isn't the Democratic County for City Council candidates or the Democratic Committee for school board races. So in many ways, that's kind of a hole that we are filling. That being said, I think especially on the state and county level, people are trying. They're under-resourced and overworked, and they have to prioritize in many places federal elections over state and county ones. I don't attribute any ill will or bad intentions to this. I think it's just the nature of the beast. It's one of the reasons why Run for Something does not do federal elections and doesn't do statewide. It's so that we don't have to make a prioritization decision. We can really focus where no one else is. I think people are trying, and we're getting better. And Republicans are on year 40 of their 40-year plan to build permanent sustainable power, and Democrats are generously on year 5. And that's rough. We're coming at it from a very long, long way back.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So scary. I do want to get to, we've had a couple questions in the chat, but I want to stick with your thinking around sort of, you were defining, progressive candidates, Democratic candidates, but you have a broad definition of what that is. So I'd love to hear that. And I'd love to hear, while you're talking about that, you sort of breaking down down for us the difference between, because you've worked on campaigns, on a gubernatorial campaign, and now you're deep in the weeds in local campaigns. Like, can you sort of talk about messaging that you saw working for federal versus local? Like, what are you really telling your candidates on how they're talking to their voters? Because it's clearly working. I mean, your return rate is dynamite.
So the values that Run for Something PAC, the one that directly supports candidates, engages with, as part of our endorsement application includes, I believe in racial justice for all, and that we have to address systemic racism through comprehensive criminal justice reform, investment in communities of color, and the like. I'm going to summarize this here. We have some very precise wording, but you'll get the gist. Income inequality, immigration reform, treating immigrants fairly and equitably, full equality for the LGBTQIA community, full gender equality, including women's health access and reproductive rights and equal pay. Climate change is man-made, threatening our planet, and needs to be addressed. Everyone has a right to feel safe and free from gun violence. And then we ask people to address what are the things that maybe you have some nuance around, or if you disagree with any of these, tell us why. More broadly, on the C3 side, we're looking for people who are pro-democracy, pro-constitution, pro-facts, anti-hate, anti-bigotry, and pro-freedom of speech and freedom of press. So pretty broad sense there. As for messaging, the thing I really like to remind people is that message does not exist in a vacuum. Think about if AOC says something, says, twinkle, twinkle, little star, and then Joe Biden says, twinkle, twinkle, little star. Those exact same words will be received very differently based on who's saying it. So to talk about message as if it is something that is separate from the person communicating it and the structures within which they're communicating it is to miss the way that voters really understand and experience these. All that's to say is that what we really work with our candidates on is finding a way to communicate their values and their beliefs in a method that is, in a framework and a method that is genuine and authentic to their community. And the way that you might talk about, say, gun safety is going to be a little different in Brooklyn than it is in the Virginia suburbs where I grew up, which will be a little different than Chicago where I went to school. And none of one of those ways is right or wrong. Each of them is a little bit different based on who's going to be receiving it and the person communicating it. And even within, say, a city council race in Brooklyn, my neighborhood, which is a admittedly pretty gentrified part of Brooklyn versus one that has a bit more gun violence a little further out, is going to have that conversation very differently, and the candidate running there is going to be different. So what we work with our candidates on is how do you connect with people in a way that they can understand? How can you genuinely be yourself, refined, but yourself, and know the way that your neighbors are going to receive it? And what we have found, and I think this is where local races can really actually find more crossover voters than statewide or even congressional ones, is that because local candidates are personally knocking doors themselves, they are able to break through some of the bullshit, pardon my French. A congressional candidate, a gubernatorial candidate is raising money. They're running TV ads. They're, hosting big events across the state. A school board candidate, a city council candidate is knocking hundreds and thousands of doors. Earlier this year, I got to talk to Chloe Maxman, who was a state house rep and now a state senator in Maine in both races, first state house, then state senate. She flipped a district red to blue. She was running in one of the oldest, most rural, most white districts in the state, and in fact, in the country. And Chloe is now she might be 28. When she first ran, she was 26 climate activist who graduated from Harvard and had started the Divest from Fossil Fuels Fund there. And Chloe was telling me how when she was running her first time around, she would knock on doors. She knocked on probably every door in her district a couple times. And she would talk to voters and have conversations with them in which they would tell her, "You are the first Democrat who's ever asked for my vote." She talked to others who would say, "You're the first politician who's ever knocked on my door. Republicans think they've got my vote in the bag, and Democrats think they don't have a shot. So nobody has ever shown up and asked me. And I like you enough that you were willing to give it a chance, that I'm willing to cross over." And she was telling me, like, yeah, I shouldn't always agree with most of her voters. A lot of them were Trump voters, but she was willing to have the conversation with them and willing to listen. And that goes a long way. So I think that's actually one of the things that breaks through that really differentiates federal and national elections from the local ones, that the conversation is not mediated by the press and it's not mediated by ads. It's candidate to voter. That's really powerful.
Yeah, that's a great example too. I love that story.
Yeah, she's great.
Can we go to the very, very disturbing and very sort of off, batshit crazy? Now I'm going to swear too, because you did, Amanda. The school board meetings, the threats of violence against school board members. How are you supporting your candidates? How are you helping them even talk about CRT? I mean, I'm sure you're having to kind of pivot the messaging a lot given what's the state of play, but just walk us through, how your candidates are feeling and how you feel like this needs to be addressed and countered even.
So we're in the middle of doing debriefs with all of our candidates from 2021 now. Our staff is having one-on-ones with each and every one who will get on the phone with us to see, how are you feeling now that the election results? What did you do well? What did you do poorly? What did you learn? To try and gather some best practices from across the hundreds of folks we had on the ballot this year. We are also looking at investing in some serious research about, and I think there's a little bit of a difference here because we're not running ads. Like Run for Something doesn't run ads to talk to voters. That's not our goal. So in many organizations, you run research and message testing in order to tell you what is the best 30-second TV ad to put up about an issue. We run message testing and research to help us give candidates a safe place to land. So like in 2020, when defund the police was the big topic of conversation, we did some research along with some partners on, especially for city council races or municipal elections, where that's actually something they could do if they win because police budgets are controlled on the municipal level. How do you talk about it? And what we found with that research, which I bring up because it's relevant now, was that voters wanted to hear what candidates had to say. There was more of a penalty paid for people who didn't talk about racism and police brutality and any of that than there was if you said the wrong thing. Saying nothing was worse than saying the wrong thing. And there is a way to talk about these issues that both appeals to the full range of voters that you need to reach when you're running in these races, from older Black voters to younger activists to white suburban parents and everything in between. So I think one of the things we're looking to do over the next couple months and hopefully by the end of March 2022 is dig in more on what is the same framework that you can find to talk about race and equity and diversity in schools in a way that is true to our values, but that doesn't instigate the same kind of backlash. Because it's important to talk about, and it's important to use words that real people use. The other thing we heard from a lot of our candidates, and I think this is a really astute observation, is that they would go to people's doors and they would, knock, knock, knock. Hi, I'm Cassandra. I'm running for school board in Dublin, Ohio. And they would have a conversation and the voter would try and argue about the facts or would try to claim something that was so untrue. Like no, the school is not teaching critical race theory. It's third graders. We're not, that's not true. And what the candidate told us was that they quickly learned it was not productive to argue about the facts, because you can't dispute someone of something that they believe, even if it's untrue, in a way that was so fundamental to their identity. So what the candidates explained was that they tried to dig in. Why is this scary for you? Why do you feel like this is a threat? Tell me why you're so upset here. Like, I can see this is really like scaring you. What is scary here? To get into the feelings behind it as opposed to the facts, because they're not true. And then you can start to talk about solutions to those feelings. You can start to give voice to validate those feelings, or find a way to validate those feelings, because for many of these folks, that feeling is based in racism. So maybe not validate it, but to hear it, to speak to it, and to provide a different answer for it other than critical race theory or whatever the issue may be. Because I do think that there is something to this, and that people are scared, people are tired, people are anxious, and they're looking for someone to blame. And you can't really blame a virus. You can't really blame the federal government, because it feels like punching at the sky. You can't really blame the United States Senate, because again, it's not an enemy you can beat. But you can be mad at your school board for teaching something you don't agree with because you feel like you can win. Like, that's a fight you can take on and win. And then all of that has been sort of lit by mega donor money from the Republican Party and, conservative media apparatus and all of that. But I think the reason it starts there is because it feels like it's something you can actually take on. So how do our candidates have conversations about that, understanding the emotions? So I will say, full transparency, we're trying to figure it out. We might bring on therapists who are experts in conflict mediation or de-escalation. We might talk to social workers who know how to engage with people who are in different mental spaces. There's a whole bunch of different ways we're thinking about it, but it's something we're really excited to learn over the next couple months.
Yeah, and it seems to be evolving day to day. So good for you for being open to figuring out what you're going to need in the future. I do want to get to, there's some great questions in the chat. So I'm just going to sort of burn through these really quickly. Leslie asked, she loves your work and she wanted to know, she's very frustrated with campaign finance. So she was sort of wondering if this is something that, you're talking about. Are campaign finance laws, are they all federal? Can your candidates work on that at the state level? Is that a possibility?
It is, it depends on the office that you're running for. Federal elections are obviously governed by the FEC. State and local elections are governed by each and every state, and then sometimes the county. So like in Texas and Virginia and Florida and one other state, that's like basically the wild, wild west. You can give an unlimited amount of money to the candidates, and in Virginia, the outside groups and the campaigns can coordinate. In Connecticut, you can give $200 to a candidate. That's it. Maybe Connecticut. There's a couple states like that where there's a very firm limit on what you can give to an individual candidate. One of the things that I think is particular about campaign finance is that it's really hard to change from the outside. The people who govern the elections are also the ones who determine the rules, and then the ones who have to run in it. So we need to elect people who care about campaign finance and make sure they have the support they need to actually act on it. I expect to see over the years, as more and more of our folks win majorities in these different bodies, they'll be able to do something about campaign finance. I personally am an avid believer, and if you change campaign finance and you fix voting rights, it all gets much easier because the systems are much more fair. But it requires winning first on the current rules. But I do think that there's a lot of room for improvement. And I know it's something many of our candidates care deeply about, especially those running for state legislature.
Yeah, great. Do you ever think about supporting candidates who are a little bit older, like, 55, for instance?
I want to be very careful because I often get lots of questions about this, and it's a totally valid question. There are very different challenges that you face in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or 20s and 30s than you do when you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s and running for office. Everything from the stage of life that you're in, the age of your kids, or the transience of your family, or maybe you're just out of college, just a very different stage of life, to the wealth of you and your network, to the establishment you have in your career, to the time you've had to build relationships. So I do think it's really important to say, I think everyone should run for office. There's a lot of different people of all different ages and backgrounds who have the experience they need. And we want to be able to focus our scope and focus our mission in a very particular way. I will also note that young people are wildly underrepresented in leadership. Barely 5% of state legislators are under the age of 35. The median school board member is 59. The median average member of Congress in the House is 58, in the Senate it's 63. There is room for younger voices at the table too. And part of that means someone needs to be there to encourage them. And historically, young people have been seen as a risk. They were risky candidates for parties to recruit and to support. So we wanted to create a space where that wasn't the case, and where we could give permission to young people to see themselves in the room. So for now, we're prioritizing folks at 40 and younger. That's not to say that won't change over time. And if folks who are older sign up with us, we recommend them for our partners who don't have the same age limitations.
Great, thank you. A couple more questions about giving through Fidelity Charitable to your 501c3. Mm-hmm. That's great. And then also, would you prefer, someone asked, Leslie asked if you would prefer your money to go to the 501c4 or 501c3?
Great question. Our preference in order is, as always, the Political Action Committee. Okay. The money is most valuable, but I know that there's a lot of legal restrictions about who can and cannot give to that, as well as personal comfort levels. Between the C3 and C4, we have no preference.
Okay, great. Lindsay Reimer, who's out in Colorado, wanted to know, and I think you answered this, but when you're tracking your candidates, whether they win or lose, how long do you stick with these folks? Is this like a lifelong relationship, or how does that work for you guys?
Yeah, sorry, that was my fault. I didn't phrase that very well, but how do you track your candidates, win or lose, and do you share this information with other orgs? So apologies.
Yeah. How do we track manually? Our election watch situation is a real mess of spreadsheets. We assign each member of our team 8 or 10 or 20 or however many races to watch, and then we refresh county, Secretary of State elections websites over and over again until there are results. We track all the way through until things are finalized, and then beyond. We absolutely share out. If you go to our Medium page or our website, you can see all of the information. We have a full running list of our winners. We have a full directory of all of our endorsements. And I'm always happy to share more specifics if you're looking for a particular demographic breakdown or any particular stat. Transparency is really important to me, in part because I'm not a good secret keeper. So we try to make sure that everything is on the level so that I don't accidentally say something wrong.
Great, thanks, Amanda. Okay, can we do a rapid fire? Right, we're getting to the end of our time. Do you mind if we do a little rapid fire?
Please.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, where do you get your news from? What's your news sources?
Oh, I am an obsessive news junkie. I read everything from the New York Times, Washington Post, Fox, BuzzFeed, Atlantic. I follow too many people on Twitter. I subscribe to way too many newsletters. My husband is obsessed with watching the Media Matters Fox News clips and showing me the weirdest ones. So everywhere.
That takes a strong stomach, I gotta say, that stuff. Yeah.
He's braver than I am.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. How about podcasts? What podcasts are you listening to?
I don't actually listen to that many political podcasts. Or this morning, though, when I was walking the dog, I was listening to The Daily. Today's episode is on school boards, so it was very relevant to our work, worth listening to. Most of the podcasts I listen to are like Forever 35, which is like skincare and makeup. It's nice. It's fun. And then interviews with writers. I'm a big reader, so interviews with writers.
Okay, that's my next question. What book are you reading?
Romance novels at the moment because I'm a little stressed, so I find them very cathartic. Yeah, it's, I think, 100% romance novels at the moment.
For you, you need to take a break. I think that's really good. Okay, so back to our next question. What's keeping you up at night, Amanda, since you're really stressed?
School board work, the end of democracy as we know it, climate change, you name it. I will say I am both equally optimistic about the work that Run for Something is doing and pessimistic about federal action to make it meaningful. I often tell by myself talking with my co-founder, if democracy can survive another 3 years, if we make it to year 4, Run for Something's community will have saved it all. But we need another 4 years to get there. So
yeah. And okay, this is not a rapid fire, but I did want to hear your sort of lessons learned from election day. You had a really good election day, it sounds like. Run for Something did. I would say Democrats not as much. When you looked at Virginia, since it's your home state, what are you sort of seeing, and what would you tell Joe Biden and the Democrats to do? They should listen to you, but what would you tell them to do for 2022?
It's in the name of the organization, but that's because it's true. You got to run for something. It is not enough to be anti-Trump, especially when he's not on the ballot. I also think it's worth thinking about, especially in primaries. I don't know if Jennifer McClellan, or especially Jennifer Carroll Foy, who is a personal favorite of mine, would have won against Glenn Youngkin. They were both in the primary against Terry McAuliffe. I do know that if a Black woman had been the Democratic nominee for governor, our conversation about race would have been very different and may have taken a different tenor, and it, I think, would have been hard to avoid. So as you look at primaries for 2022, you look at the United States Senate primaries or even some of these governor's races, being willing to support early candidates of color, even if you're not sure they can win, because who knows, think deeply about that, because the conversation about race when the Democratic nominee is a person of color is very different. And I think that's often in a very good way. Putting aside, all the other reasons why these folks are amazing leaders, I think it changes the tenor of conversation and often the enthusiasm level. The final thing I would say is that the field operations in the Virginia campaign left a lot to be desired, especially for down ballot. This was not a question of money. This was just a question of prioritization. They spent a lot on TV ads and not enough on organizers. And I don't think we should make that mistake again.
All right. I hope they listen to you. We'll do what we can at Big Ten, I promise. And I just want to remind everyone, there are links in the chat if you want to support Run for Something. So go to that. Please check out their website. The videos they have on their website are really great. You can hear from candidates and how Run for Something supported them. And it's very inspirational. It will make you feel good in this time of anxiety. So with that, I want to say thank you so much, Amanda, for coming to Big Tent. We really appreciate your time, your effort, your energy. And I think you're doing something that's so, so valuable and so, so needed for our democracy and for our, just healthy civic engagement. So thank you. And I want to remind everybody, we hope you'll come to Charlie Whelan on December 8th and Sheldon Whitehouse on January 12th. We hope everyone has a healthy, happy Thanksgiving. And thank you for coming to Big Tent.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
There ain't no man